Hello and welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM and on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Joining us today is Jules Barker of Wiredscore, Global Director of Product at Wirescore. And Jules is responsible for the creation, delivery and evolution of all products and associated services, including the probably well known across the industry, Wiredscore Digital Connectivity Certification and indeed SmartScore. Jules, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Carol. I'm really happy to be here.
I think many people who were involved in the delivery of I'm using the term smart buildings quite broadly here, but anybody who's familiar with the delivery of smart buildings will be familiar with Wiredscore. It has become the industry standard for connectivity, but for anybody who's not familiar, you might just talk us through what Wiredscore is and what the certification means.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to. So Wirescore is a certification that essentially tells you how robust, how reliant, how resilient your internet connectivity is in your building. It came about from New York back in 2013 in response to a challenge of how do we improve the internet in New York. And Ari Barendrecht, our founder, said, well, let's gamify it. We'll create a certification that says how good it is. And then landlords will be able to compare to each other and compete to build the most resilient and best connected buildings.
Resilience is a term that's thrown around. What does that mean in the context of real estate? Because actually, I think resilience has been wrapped up a lot in sustainability, and sometimes that message can get a little bit confusing. So when you're talking about the resiliency of real estate across the portfolios that you deal with, what are you talking about?
Well, what I guess I'm really talking about there is making sure, in the case of Wirescore, that the internet stays up and stays running. And you say it's got wrapped up in sustainability. Actually, my view is that it's being missed out of the sustainability agenda really quite significantly at the moment. We talk quite a lot about ESG, and I think, and increasingly, I think the industry is coming around to the perspective that we need to talk about ESGR with a fourth missing letter being resilience, because we've got to do two things with our buildings. One is reduce the emissions so that we're reducing our impact on the climate. But the second one is to recognize that no matter how well we do that, there's still going to be change coming. There's still going to be turmoil. And we've got to build buildings that are resilient and are able to carry on operating in a modern world, in a world that's got increasing turbulence and change in it.
And you talked about essentially gamifying, and this really probably plays into the human side of real estate. Look, we always talk about real estate being human, and it is a human-centric business, but actually the gamifying really goes to the psychology across developers and people delivering these buildings, because I think it's something that outside the industry gets missed, that the industry perhaps has a reputation for just trying to maximize profits, whereas actually within the industry, the reputational side, being the best, that's a huge driver for so many developers. They want the biggest, the best, the newest. They want to deliver something in a development that hasn't been delivered before. You use the term gamifying across the certification. How important is that, beyond a tick box exercise, how important is it for the clients you're seeing delivering top quality into the market? How important is it for them to be able to show that?
I think it's really important. And absolutely, Carol, thank you. It's not a tick box exercise, being Wirescore certified or SmartScore certified. It's really about two things. One is being able to assess and prove and benchmark your building against the others in the other buildings around you in the local environment, so that you can outcompete in the rental market, so that people want to come and rent your buildings, and that drives rental tension and that drives rents, and your buildings and your company outperforms. But the other one is the guidance that sits behind it. Effectively, our scorecards also provide a roadmap for you and particularly I think this is the case in SmartScore, where there are a lot of people still around there who know that for all sorts of reasons, to make better buildings, more sustainable buildings, more efficient buildings, they need to deploy technology, but you don't necessarily know where to start. And so one of the fundamental pillars of SmartScore is that the product and the scorecard acts as a roadmap for you to help you make those decisions and help you build better buildings as well.
I definitely want to talk to you more about that, because actually, as a throwaway comment, we talk about putting the right technology in, but actually the right technology isn't the same for every building, and obviously will depend on the occupiers, the users. But just before we get on to that, can you talk to me maybe about the buildings that are currently certified? Are we talking about almost all newly built?
Well, for Wirescore and SmartScore, it's a slightly different picture, and obviously, by market, it's a different picture. But certainly in geographies like London and like New York, it tends to be the case that if you want to compete in the market, you need to sign up your new development for Wirescore and increasingly for SmartScore. But as I said, for us, this is about enabling you to compete against your peers and also supporting you in building a better building. So I would say absolutely anyone building a new commercial office, pick up the phone and come to us, definitely.
But what about for existing buildings?
Yeah, existing buildings as well. So we can help not just by taking your brand new flagship development and supporting you in building that better and showcasing it, but of course there's a huge number of existing standing stock out there in the market that quite often is in need of improvement. And we can absolutely do that as well. So the certification has different levels. And so whilst you might want to be aiming nearer the top with your brand new building, it's still a real accolade and still sets you out against your peers if you're getting certified in a 30-year-old office building. That still demonstrates to your potential tenants that you've got robust and resilient internet in a building where maybe next door it doesn't, because it hasn't had that investment. And so we can go in there and easily take the complexity out of all of those complex terms like all the complex internet terms that are out there, and we can take the complexity out and give a simple certificate that allows you to prove as a landlord that it's a solid, resilient and reliable building.
Do you have any data yet in terms of, say, for not the newly built, but for secondhand properties, and have you any data yet to see how the Wiredscore certification can actually, and indeed, sorry, SmartScore, how it impacts the value of the lease? Do you have that data yet?
Yeah, we do. There's a pretty old piece that was done with JLL a couple of years ago, and we've got a couple of pieces of research that should be out within the next 4 to 6 weeks that point to exactly that. And unsurprisingly, I'm very pleased that it is demonstrating. We're working with third parties, so it's we've given them the data and they've analysed, or we've given them the Wirescore data and they've analysed from their own rental data. So it's third-party research, and it is showing exactly that for all types of buildings, there is a measurable and statistical significant uplift in rents for Wirescore certified buildings.
Very good. Jules, before we go any further, can you explain the difference between Wirescore and SmartScore?
Yeah, happy to. So Wirescore I've talked about a couple of times in the last few minutes. That focuses on the resilience of internet connectivity in a building. And then SmartScore focuses on smart buildings. So the way in which you are using, as a landlord, operator, developer, the way in which you're using technology to drive better outcomes for all the stakeholders in a building. And by all the stakeholders, I mean not just the owners, the investors, the operators, but also the occupiers, the tenants, and their employees as well. How are you using technology to reliably and efficiently make a better building?
Okay, so is that where we're getting into the use of maybe different IoT devices to do different functions, like, measuring footfall, usage, air quality, acoustics, all of that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. All of those different things is what SmartScore looks at, how you're using technology to do that.
Very good. Okay, let's go back to the roadmap, because actually I think for people listening in, particularly real estate owners or portfolio managers, that's what they're going to be most interested in, because we mentioned it earlier in the interview there about, we talk about the right technology. It's very difficult to know what the right technology is, and there's a lot of prop tech sales going on. And actually, particularly since COVID, I find that sales are being well received, and maybe people are buying without understanding what they're buying and why they're buying. So can you talk to us maybe about the roadmap that you would be helping portfolio owners put together? And is this on a portfolio basis or on a building by building basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So we certify on a building by building basis. And you asked how do you identify the right technology from all of the different sales that are happening, and that is absolutely what we're here to help with. So I'd encourage everyone to pick up the phone, but more generally, my advice here, and this is how our product is set up, is you start with the outcomes. A historic mistake I think it's really easy to make is to get seduced by the technology. Someone will come in and tell you that they've got something that will do something really whizzy in your building, and you think that sounds brilliant, and you put it in without starting from, what do I want the building to do? And so at the very earliest possible design stages, you should be starting with the outcomes you want that building to deliver. What do you want the building to do? And then based on those outcomes, you work with the supply chain, with the consultants and with the architects and the providers to deliver the technology that delivers those outcomes and not other ones. And the reason for that is twofold. One is, if you don't start like that, you'll realize that the building's not doing some things that you really wanted it to do and you really need it to do. But then the second thing is, you end up wasting huge amounts of money on technology that then needs to be replaced and retrofitted with different technology within a couple of years. So,
And sorry, just in that context, can you maybe share some of the experiences dealing with clients? What are the priorities? So are the priorities from a reputational point of view to improve the comfort of people within the buildings? Are we prioritizing compliance? Is it about sustainability, or is it coming down to returns? Like, what are the driving priorities?
I think all those priorities, Karen, actually push in the same direction, fortunately. It's a question of balancing them all in the right way, which again goes back to the outcomes. But the kind of priorities I think we're seeing clients drive is sustainability is one, and we can talk more about that. But it's clear that you can't build a sustainable, efficient, modern commercial building unless you deploy the right technology in it. So sustainability is one really important outcome. Another one is cost efficiency, and those obviously interrelate with each other, because if you're using less energy to run the building, it's more cost effective, and it's more sustainable as a building. And then the third one is the customer experience, the user experience in that building. Are you creating a building that people actually want to come to? And in a world where employers are increasingly competing with the kitchen table at home to make people, they've got to make people want to come back into the office. Offering a great experience is really important. And not to mention the fact that if you think about how your home has probably changed over the last 30 or 40 years in a way that certainly a year or two ago, the office just hadn't. There's a lot of catching up to do there. And then the fourth thing is about future proofing. And again, that interrelates with cost efficiency, because making sure you're deploying the right technology that will be resilient against changes in technology will save you money in the long term. And so collectively, getting all of those things right then in turn drives out performance in terms of rents, but it also will reduce the changes and the cost to run the building and put new capex into the building. So it drives returns overall. So they all feed into each other. By balancing those things right, you're absolutely outperforming from a financial sense as well.
These things do feed into each other, but do they compete? So, for example, when we talk about real estate, we're talking about both the long and the short term. So you talked about future proofing the building. We know that's essential from a sustainability point of view. But is that in any way conflicting with what building users want right now? Because again, you rightly pointed out, the office is competing with the kitchen table. It is just been such an unprecedented time for commercial real estate, but also for humanity. So I suppose really, is there a conflict in where buildings need to get to and what the users want right now?
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? That's a really, really interesting challenge. I don't think so. I think what putting the right technology in a building allows you to do as an owner or an operator is to optimize that building in a way that you have choice. For the first time, you have real choice at a super granular level about how that building will perform. Now, you're absolutely right, Carol. You could choose to dial the sustainability all the way up or the user comfort all the way up. In the depths of winter, you're pumping the heating all the time. That's not good for sustainability and might be good for comfort. But you do have a choice about that for the first time. And I think that's incredibly powerful. But the other interesting thing about that is I don't think we're now living in a world where that is actually what users want. There is a real recognition. Many of the people outside the offices, the people in the street, care even more deeply about climate change. And so I don't think we are actually in a world where you say, well, we can either optimize for sustainability of heating or comfort of heating, because a lot of people dearly, dearly want to work for an employer in a building that they think is helping the climate. So I don't think there is. I increasingly think we're all pulling in the same direction here. And the wonderful thing about putting the right technology in buildings is it allows you to optimize in the way you want to optimize.
I think it's a really interesting time, and I look forward to seeing the research that is due to come out from Wiredscore over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So as soon as that issues, perhaps we might have a chat again. But for now, that's all we've time for today. My thanks to Jules Barker of Wiredscore. We need to take a quick break. Stay tuned.